All our actions depend on our philosophy of life. That philosophy may be unconscious and implicit, or it may be conscious and explicit. The relations between our actions and our philosophy is like the relations between the solid earth and the atmosphere around us. Now, a fool, an idiot, could say there ain't nothing up there. But it's the atmosphere that gives us light, warmth, water, and life. So the solid earth couldn't function without the atmosphere. And you and I, in all our actions, we only function because we have a philosophy of life, whether we could spell it out or not. That's what guides our actions. But are our philosophies correct? You've heard of the poet Omar Khayyam, Arabian poet, wrote the Rubaiyat. He said, "Myself when young did oft frequent both doctor and saint, and heard great argument about it and about. But evermore I came out by the same door as in I went." So what was this poet philosopher saying? He's saying, I heard all sorts of people discussing life and the meaning of life. I didn't learn anything. Why not? Because they were pooling their ignorance. See, everything's related to everything else. To know everything about anything, you'd have to know everything about everything. That's beyond us. Even the scientists tell us, don't use the word proof. To have absolute proof, you'd have to have perfect measuring instruments, an infinite number of observations, and complete objectivity. We don't have those. So here we are, guided by a philosophy, but is our philosophy right? There's a way of testing your philosophy of life. There are certain questions that, if answered properly, will give you great happiness and great success. If these questions are not answered properly, your philosophy is wrong and you'll only have misery. Misery, misery. What are the questions? Is the universe friendly? Robbie Louis Stevenson, who wrote those wonderful stories like Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he said, I believe in the ultimate decency of things, and if I woke up in hell, I'd still believe it. Is he right? Is the universe friendly? That's the first question. The next one is, who or what am I? You know, if you go into a new house, would you tolerate in the front room a big gadget, same size as you, and you didn't know what it was for? How long would you live with it in the house if you didn't know what it was for? But suppose I go to an atheist and I say, what are your eyes for? He says, you pulling my leg. And I say, no, tell me, what are your eyes for? He said, to see. What are your ears for? To hear. What's your mouth for? To swallow and talk. Well, what are you for? You know what your ears and eyes and mouth are for. What are you for? No answer. So that's the second question. Who am I? What am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? How do I get there? Unless those questions are answered properly, we become workaholics, alcoholics, suicides, or something similar. You cannot have a morally upright life or real happiness unless those questions are answered. But we can't answer them. Unless God gives us the answer, we're done for. There are many professing revelations like the Quran, the Zendavestas, but the only one that can stand the test of investigation is this one. This is the only one. And I could spend days and weeks with you showing why we can believe in it as a revelation from God and can trust its answers to these questions so that our philosophy is right and our behaviour is right. Because remember, actions have consequences. We can choose how to act, but we can't choose the results of our actions. Actions have consequences. So you've got to have a right philosophy of life so you act properly. You've heard of Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog. He coined the word agnostic. I don't know. But here's something he did know. He said, the ledger of the Almighty is strictly kept, and every one of us has the balance of his operations paid over to him at the end of every minute of his existence. Because sin brings sorrow as surely as the earth gravitates to the sun. And anyone with eyes to see can learn that even our present state is a state of rewards and punishments. What he was thinking about, and he went on to say, we have lots of illustrations in life of actions have consequences. For example, did you know that syphilis has killed more people than all the wars of history? Here's one, and there are about 40 STDs. Here's one, and it has killed more people than all the wars of history. Actions have consequences. We live in a perilous world. I think I've probably told you before what the great Manchester preacher Maclaren said. He said, I don't know how godless people confront the facts of life and don't go mad. Here we are at birth, naked, feeble, alone, and we're thrust into a whirlpool from the awful vortices of which we cannot extricate ourselves. And there foam and swirl all manner of evil, all possibilities of pain and death, some of them certain, some of them probable, all of them possible. And Lord David Cecil said something similar. He wrote a biography of William Cooper, often called Cowper, called The Stricken Deer, about this very talented but nervy man who was all the time wondering about problems and troubles. And Lord Cecil said, the mental state of William Cooper was not abnormal, but nervous and fearful people often see life more accurately than healthy people who are the dupes of their own digestion. The only abnormality, said Lord Cecil about William Cooper, was his premature deliverance from the delusions of youth. You know, it's a big transition growing up. The way you and I looked at the world when we were 7 years old or 10 years old or 13 years old, very different the way we saw it when we were 16 years old and 18 years old and 20 years old. And much more is that the case when you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 and 80.